been a joy to work with, and all of our students are. And her project is called Supporting Sustainable Fashion Through Storytelling. So, Lorna, welcome.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Can you all hear me? Okay. So yeah, hi folks, my name is Lorna Gaddis, and I'm here to tell you about my capstone project, also known as Violet's Vision, or I think it's going to be Violet Has a Vision. Violet is the protagonist of a picture book I've created that takes the reader along her journey of a remake project that introduces sustainable fashion concepts and traditional textile craft. So fashion for me has always been a love and fascination of mine as a form of artistic expression of identity, gender, politics, and cultural zeitgeist, as a means of subverting and celebrating societal norms, often simultaneously. I see it as deeply political while overlapping with sustainability issues, something else I'm deeply committed to. In high school, fashion offered me a form of expression and a way to explore different ways of walking through the world. I didn't have the language to fully articulate my beliefs, but dress was a way for me to signal my alliance to subcultures that reflected my values. I had a very special art teacher in high school who supported me in creating an independent study in fashion design. I pieced together patterns to create a collection made from thrifted fabric using my mom's old sewing machine. My passion took me to New York City, where I studied fashion design at Pratt Institute. I started my career working with independent designers and costumers, but the conversation about sustainable fashion was still just a whisper back then. Now it's a hot topic with major designers and labels getting involved. So I got curious. How are art educators getting involved? I'll give you a minute to review the National Art Education Association and how they define the visual arts. So, no mention of fashion design or textile arts, but they have specifically defined architecture and landscape architecture, with fiber grouped at the very end with other materials. NABA, why the omission? I'll tell you why I find this problematic. This reinforces a system that puts little importance on our garments and the people that make them. By eliminating fashion and textile arts from the visual arts curriculum, we exclude a huge population of artists and craftspeople from the narrative who have been traditionally left out of the art canon, largely women and people of color. So we have the opportunity as art educators to invite our students into the rich tradition of fashion and fiber art in a way that gets them to think critically about where their clothing comes from and where it's going when they're done with it. The equivalent of one garbage truck of clothes is burned or dumped in a landfill every second. And while we might not be able to fix the entire problem, we can at least learn to fix our clothes when they need repair. Extending the life of your garment means less clothing in the landfill and fewer carbon emissions to create new ones. So I decided to write a picture book to demystify the process of an upcycling project. The epilogue of the book contains information about why you should care and how you move on. So my central research question is, how will my knowledge of children's literature, textile craft, and the fashion industry inform my creation of a picture book to educate young readers about sustainable fashion practices? My project utilized an arts-based approach. For those unfamiliar, Patricia Levy offers the following definition of arts-based research in her book, Method Meets Art. So it's a set of methodological tools used by researchers across the disciplines during any or all phases of research, including data generation, analysis, interpretation, and representation. These emerging tools adapt the tenets of the creative arts in order to address research questions in holistic and engaged ways in which theory and practice are intertwined. Art-based practices draw on literary writing, dance, performance, visual arts, film, and other mediums. So my research took shape as an analysis of existing children's picture books, researching literature and videos about children's literature, and also from my own art making experience, which culminated in the creation of my own picture book, and more on that later. So, my lit review, I addressed the following concepts: fast fashion and its environmental impact, sustainability theory, sustainable fashion curriculum, and the K-12 art classroom, and finally, the picture book. So, up until the 90s, we had only 2 seasons for fashion. These were necessary because you need a summer wardrobe and a winter wardrobe. Now most companies who follow the European model offer 5 annual collections, while other fast fashion companies offer even more, such as H&M, which averages between 12 and 16, and Zara at 24 annually. This has drastically changed the way we value our garments and the people that make them. These statistics were taken from the World Economic Forum, just to highlight the environmental impact. But there's also a major humanitarian crisis at hand. In 2013, a garment factory in Bangladesh called the Lorna collapsed, killing 1,134 garment workers and injuring hundreds more. And while this was not the official start of the sustainable fashion movement, it was a devastating call to action. And before we talk about some of the solutions, I just wanted to define sustainability. Sustainability theory is my theoretical framework for this project. And essentially what we're looking at here is this is an unending holistic process that constantly needs re-examining. It's about creating long-term relationships that extend resources. It also means there's not a single one-and-done answer. So sustainable fashion, also known as slow fashion, green, eco, and ethical fashion, focuses on fair working conditions, organic, environmentally friendly, and ethically sourced materials, extended life cycles of garments, supporting local economies, and moving beyond a passive role as a consumer. Kate Fletcher is kind of the lead researcher in sustainability in terms of sustainable fashion and textiles. And she tells us that the stories, language, and images of garments of fashion are shaped by our past experiences of it and set by as an ideology of more and cheaper that has become both both a necessity and an aspiration in contemporary Western society. Understanding this relationship is central to a shift to a sustainability-focused fashion and textile sector. And this shift from passive consumer to active user and maker is one I hope to encourage with my picture book. So unfortunately, there is very little research that fits directly within the intersection of sustainability, fashion design, and K-12 art education. According to Shepard and Putlangara, despite the critical nature and importance of slow fashion, there is little research examining how this important concept can be taught in the classroom. I did, however, find some great examples in Sweden's educational SLOI program, which is a mandatory school subject of art, design, and craft for grades 3 through 9. It puts a very large emphasis on education for sustainable development. And one exploration of a creative remake project from which these illustrations were taken uses problem-based pedagogy, which deepens understanding of the problem within a larger context. So it's promoting a shift from interaction to transaction, where what we make also makes us. This is the sort of role shift required to deepen our relationships with our clothes, thus moving the consumer into the role of user, maker, lender, caregiver, extending the interaction beyond purchasing for long-term meaning making. This is also the inspiration of my picture book. So today's picture book is defined by its particular use of sequential imagery, usually in tandem with a small number of words to convey meaning. In contrast to the illustrated book, where pictures enhance, decorate, and amplify, in the picture book, the visual text will often carry as much of the narrative responsibility. In most cases, the meaning emerges through the interplay of word and image neither of which makes sense when experienced independently of each other. This definition was taken from a book called Children's Picture Books, The Art of Visual Storytelling, in which the author Salisbury and Stiles explore the effective use of visual text in educational development. They offer that the most challenging books are the ones that make children think in new ways, which they often find deeply absorbing. I took this as a challenge. In the next section, we'll see how I applied what I learned. So, using arts-based research, this was a bit of a non-linear process. All of these steps overlapped, but this is the general order in which things went. So I started with the book review, writing a manuscript, learning as much as I could about the picture book as an art form and teaching tool, and then working on my sketchbook, creating dummies, incorporating textile knowledge, and finally making the final illustrations. So I analyzed a total of 60 picture books. The reading list included books I witnessed the use of in art classrooms, Caldecott winners from the past decade, and recommendations from an expert K through 8 school librarian with over 30 years experience. Her recommendations focused on books about art, social justice, conduct, life, inclusion, and wisdom. And I gotta give a shout out to my mom. So I created a qualitative system, which first starts with a star rating between 1 and 5. This subjective rating system was a way for me to flag books that evoke either. Next, I gave my first impression and personal connection to the book an emotional response. Then I analyzed the text and the art independently, but also noted how they work to create cohesion, juxtaposition, harmony, and humor. When it came to writing the manuscript, the story seemed to kind of just write itself. I had the story pretty much planned out in my head about a little girl that goes to a swap meet, finds a garment, and takes it through the various steps of an upcycling project. And then there were other devices I needed to kind of figure out how to weave together. So I knew I wanted to avoid rhyming, but I did really want it to have a good sense of rhythm. I love the use of alliteration, but I didn't want it to feel too forced. I like books that use some repetition and the rule of threes, which is why I broke the stories project into 3 trials. Dye over a stain, patch over a hole, and sew the garment to make it fit. So my main character, Violet, doesn't reuse the exact same language, but the setup is familiar. The one repeated phrase is also the title of the book about Violet's vision. The first draft was sent to Pierce for review, followed by some minor edits. The biggest changes happened when I finally added illustrations and realized how many words I could eliminate because the picture could better explain the ideas. So, while I am fairly confident in my drawing ability, I lack the experience using my drafting skills to tell a sequential story. I needed to create a believably lovable character set in a world that feels familiar yet exciting. I knew I wanted the pictures to show more than what the words could do alone. So I turned to the experts. I read and watched interviews and biographies of illustrators such as Trina Sharp-Hyman, Tommy Dekawa, and Hilary Knight. And it's really fascinating to see these profiles next to each other when their styles are in such dramatic contrast to one another, and yet they use a lot of the same devices. These books help me figure out the basics of format, media, and other industry standards. So, for example, traditional publishing houses expect submissions to include a manuscript, a book dummy, and of pencil sketches, and then 2 to 3 finalized illustrations. Almost all picture books are 32 pages because they're constructed of 8-page signatures, so you can jump up to 40 pages. You don't really get anything in between. And then the page format is generally determined by how it supports the narrative. So, if the protagonist is on a long journey, then a horizontal format might offer the feeling of extended time. And Blackwell's 2018 Caldecott winning book, Hello White House, the skinny vertical format mirrors the towering shape of the structure. This artist expertly created a sense of family togetherness within the physical confines of the page, which works as a strong visual metaphor for the character's actual life experiences living in a White House. So, a lot of time went into the sketchbook, which plays a key role in the providing a private world of things, people, ideas, places, and occasional shopping lists. This precedes all the other more applied approaches to picture book making, the ones that can be taught in more tangible ways, such as visual, sequential paints, and word-image relationships. Within this private world of the sketchbook, the need to get things down for future or present reference to capture things and ideas before they escape can gradually help to overcome self-consciousness and aid the process of establishing personal voice. And this was a really key reminder to me that my sketches, even those that seem unrelated to my book, are in fact key to supporting the overall strength of my work as an illustrator. There were times when I was either intimidated or uninspired to work on my book, or the illustration specifically for that, but I made every attempt to at least work a little bit in my sketchbook each day, often drawing from direct observation, like the ones you see in the top right corner, which are the studies from my studio. And then down below are some preliminary character sketches of Violet, just trying to figure out who she is. So, the more advanced illustrator might only make one dummy. I, however, created a total of 4. The first one, which is the little guy down in front, is mostly just text. I printed out and then moved it all around with sketch tape, which is a highly advanced form of text editing. But doing it digitally doesn't really give you the same physical sense of page turning, and I wanted to make sure that the rhythm worked out before I started adding images. So I want to share with you an example of how the illustrations evolved over the course of the 4 dummies. So here we have a very rough sketch of Violet going to the swap meet, and the text is completely changed over the course as well. But next it gets a little more interesting compositionally. I've included a list of elements that I think might be fun to include in later versions. By number 3, I've pretty much worked out what I wanted to show. I included many of the items from the brainstorm list from the previous dummy, such as this little squirrel-dog interaction towards the center, who will also be repeat characters throughout the book. And then finally, I've expanded into a larger format with, square. And then one of the main challenges in creating this book was creating harmony between teaching moments and the story, right? Because in the end, it's a story about a persevering young artist who finds solutions and builds grit. This is what we as art educators hope to instill in our students. Of course, we also want to teach art skills. So I structured the story to follow Violet through 3 stages of the remake project. And this is her searching for it at the community swap meet, which is quite a community effort that introduces Violet to fabric from all over the world. I illustrated the names of the fabric and washed on flat cardstock to give readers an example of what the patterns might look like. And then here I created a bit of a hide-and-seek opportunity for the readers to extend their knowledge of textile names by hunting for them in the racks of painting clothes on the left. Okay. When Violet gets home, she discovers a stain, which only bumps her out for a second before she comes up with a solution. So why is she holding a bunch of beads? Well, you've got to turn the page to find out. And here we are in the first stage of Violet's remake project, which introduces natural dyeing techniques with an engaging little visual map to help guide you through the steps. And there are plenty of awesome resources out there that explain in detail how to dye at home, and this isn't that. My goal is to demystify and get kids curious about the concept. So here are my final 3 illustrations to send off for review to potential publishers. This one you've already seen. Oops, go back. I chose it because I felt it really created a unique learning opportunity. And then here's the next step after the dyeing project or process, when Violet enlists the help of her mother to do some alterations to the dress, which is clearly way too big for her. And then finally, this one shows the 3rd and final step of Violet's project. You see her here mending her dress after discovering a hole, which she darns and dresses with a daisy. She loves it so much, she adds some hearts and a rainbow too. So my final takeaways, which I'll rush through. So it felt a little bit open-ended, the arts-based research, but I think it really helped me lean into my intuition. There were weeks when all I did was read books to prepare for the art-making component. For some reason, I was just really intimidated to get started on the final board. But once I did, I had so much fun with the illustrations. I put all this pressure on myself to kind of be an expert without realizing how much you learn through doing. And this is the whole point of ABR, I think, is, you know, a lot of us are people that have to create meaning through our own experience. So, yeah, that's kind of it. I'm really glad to share my journey with anyone else who's interested in creating their own teaching tool in the shape of a picture book. And really quick next steps. So I need to research publishers for their specific requirements for submissions, and then I'd love to get it published. And I'd love to take my story out on the road to tour schools and other community settings to engage in as well, and remake events. I'm actually hosting one here for Earth Day on the 22nd. If you're interested, it's my first time hosting a community and remake session, so